Hello there, my name is PolishLynx, and this is Narcissu, a little iris. Alright, so today we are going with Chapter 8. Fate of a Killer is the title of it. Well, let's see where this will lead. The next day, for once there was a clear winter sky. It stretched endlessly high, a clear blue.
Oi, もっと顔を下げろ。
We had left the forest and moved onto the plains. To be honest, I didn't want to go through this area, but we couldn't get to the next country without doing so, so there's no helping it. With such great lines of sight here, it was perfect for an ambush. In other words, we're at a great disadvantage. At a glance it seemed it would be easy for both sides to spot each other, but there were large rocks along the way. If you wanted to hide, you wouldn't have any trouble. And the moment we passed, they burst out suddenly and there was no guarding against it, nor any way to run. There weren't many good positions left until we crossed the border. If I were the hunter, I would definitely stop here. And even she probably understood this. Her face was somehow worried, scared, not like how she normally was. For some reason, that made me sad, so I spoke up.
なあ、姫様。どうだ？一つ俺と賭けをしないか。
賭け？
ああ。内容は俺とお前どちらが長生きするかだ。
私に決まってるじゃない。
じゃあ俺は自分に賭けるとしよう。
いいわよ。それで何を賭けるの？
そりゃあもちろんすべてだ。
Most likely, once we've cleared the border, there won't be anyone after us. At the least, it wasn't likely anyone would come soon. Moreover, the neighboring country's relationship wasn't exactly what you'd call friendly. If anything, it wouldn't be a surprise if they started fighting at any moment. Taking that into consideration, it was unthinkable that anyone would cross the border in pursuit of the princess. And for now, we just had to pray that no enemies appeared here. The short winter day ended, and in moments it changed to night. Snow had begun to fall again at some point, and it struck our bodies, accompanied by a strong wind. We kept walking as our hair grew whiter, and eventually, they suddenly appeared. Without warning, they appeared in front of our eyes from the rocks. 4 knights on horses. I hadn't let my guard down, but their appearance was sudden nonetheless. And these were, without a doubt, real knights. Nothing like the outlaws and conscripts up until now.
やはりそう簡単には見逃してくれないか。
And the ones confronting us this time were probably here with a mission and purpose. And of course I didn't have to think on what purpose they did have.
なかなかの人気者ぶりだな。
何のことよ。
いや、こっちのことだ。
Since she was a surviving Cry family member, there was no way they would let her get away. I knew that much from the beginning. Not to mention there were only a few places where you could stop someone from fleeing the country.
おい、そこの男、お前は何者だ?
A young voice called from atop the horse.
何故、お前はその女と共にいる。気にするな。俺はただの雪吊りのものだ。ならば、さっさと消えろ。邪魔をすれば、殺す。
Huh? With those words, he glared at me. He probably would kill me without hesitation if I interfered. But it seemed they weren't about to kill the girl next to me. And this time they didn't have short bows either, so it seemed likely they were going to take her with them rather than kill her on the spot. But even so, us against 4 mounted men were poor odds. At best, we'd kill each other, more than likely I'd just die. And these didn't seem like the types to be swayed by bribery or tricks. They took on their duties as a matter of principle, real knights.
あなた、逃げるなら今のうちよ。
は？
私は戦うわ。
Her mouth said that, but the hand reaching for her sword was shaking. It was the first time I'd ever seen her truly afraid.
やめておけ。お前が挑んだところで無駄だ。
じゃあどうするのよ。
そりゃ難しい問題だな。
As I said that, I put my hand on my sword. I've never been in this situation. Well, not on the giving side anyway. Thinking normally, there was no way a single person could defeat multiple knights. I think there was a chance. But...
まあ軽いもんだ。死ぬ気でいけば。
At the same time I ran. As I dashed towards my opponents, I thought... Would this be how I die? After thinking and thinking, and waiting, I couldn't think of anything but that one simple thought. His way of thinking is not that original. Instantly covering the distance, I lowered my body until I was inches from the ground. My first target wasn't a human, but a horse. Perhaps they were overconfident, or didn't expect my resistance, but they didn't have anything like a bow. Thus, I knew that this moment, before they dismounted when their guard was down, was my one chance at victory. The war horse's front legs were lined up. I aimed low at the narrow part near the hoof, and struck hard. A surprised voice came from the horse and man. I continued to swing my sword broadly. I didn't care if my aim was off. Keeping as low as I could, out of reach of their swords while mounted, I aimed for the horse's legs. That spot was almost all bone, and normally we would be unable to cut through it. But even so, as far I could, I swung hard. The hoofs of two horses flew into the air along with blood, trailing blood after them, and I saw the shapes of their riders fall to the ground. And at the same time, the remaining two horses clattered to the ground. The fallen soldiers were on their knees, unable to get up immediately. They drew their swords where they were. Now, calmly checking the situation of the three, I first ran to the two soldiers who had only fallen over, and I dealt with the defenseless one on his knees. I chopped off his head from behind. With the return stroke, I stabbed the other through the neck. Catching my breath slightly, I went to the two who had been violently thrown to the ground from their horses. Moments ago, I could only hear groans from them. They were already clearly in no condition to fight. Most likely, he had broken his neck in the fall. He probably fell in the wrong spot. It happened often in heavy, restrictive armor. I spoke to the remaining soldier who was still groaning. Huh? 4 on 2 is not coward, right? Who is speaking now? Cowardice, right? Is the word.
その通りだが、何か不都合があるか?
Not to speaking for against one little girl. Saying that, I laughed a bit, calling this cowardly this knight. No, this soldier playing at being a knight would never in his life fight as though he expected to die. Bad looks.
どうやらこれも俺の死に様ではなかったか。
I just wish he'd decide already. He was probably still thinking, or something like this just wasn't enough.
終わったの？
まあな。
Nodding, I wiped the blood of my sword, and then I spoke to that one surviving young knight.
なあ、騎士さん。一つ質問だが、お前、死にたいか?
He didn't say any words, but shook his head slightly.
では、見逃してやるから。もう二度と俺たちの元へは来るなよ。
ああ、わかった。
誓えるか？
それは無理だ。 俺が来なくても別の奴が来るだろう。
まあ、そうだろうな。
Well, that pretty much couldn't be helped. If anything, his being honest in a situation like this could just barely be called knightly.
おい、姫様。お前ちょっと向こうに行ってろ。
どうして？
いいから言われた通りにしろ。
At those words, the princess reluctantly went off. I didn't really want her to hear, if possible. Eventually, while stumbling, the young knight stood up. He was still off balance, but seemed fine.
俺を見逃すと後悔するぞ。
かもな。それより騎士、見逃してやるついでに、お前にいいことを教えてやる。
いいこと？
以前、あの姫が消えた時、お前の国の司祭が殺されたことがあったろ。
おう。
あれは俺が殺した。他の傭兵も全て俺がやった。
何？
それに、最近辺境で機関兵が殺されているのも俺だ。
The young knight's expression showed he didn't believe me. But gradually his eyes started to question.
なぜそんなことを教える？
お前には関係ない。それより、俺の気が変わらぬうちにさっさと行け。
Trying to protect her. It that way. With those words, albeit with stumbling steps, he went. From the looks of it, he would most likely return safely.
ね
With a dissatisfied look, the princess came over. She had been watching us from the distance until just now.
どうして逃がしたのよ。
お前だって前に逃したじゃねえか。
それは。
She probably didn't expect that kind of response. She lowered her face, wearing an unreadable expression. And as if she didn't want to me ask what? And as if she didn't want to ask me further, she shifted her eyes away from me. I'm sure that even she should have noticed now. She should be feeling the pain of bleeding.
なあ、姫様。こんな言葉を知っているか。愚者でも千に一つは正しく、賢者でも万に一つは誤りを犯す。
何のこと？
つまり俺は愚者だということだ。
That's right, I'm just a killer. Without a doubt, a fool. But I think she's different from me. No, I want her to be different. That's what I hope. That night, once again we were warming ourselves by a fire. Wrapped in the warmth of the crackling fire, we exchanged words.
あとどれくらいなのかしら。
Murmuring shortly, in this case, she was asking how much further it was to the border.
そうだな。早ければ2、3日ほどだろう。
そう。
We chosen to stick to the mountains to avoid ice, and it had taken us quite a while. It was unlikely they would cross the border. But even then, that was just for now. It didn't mean they wouldn't cross over someday.
あなた、この国を出れたらどうするの？
さあな。まだ考えてない。
じゃあ、前に言ってた死に方は見つかった？
まだそれも試案中だ。
My way of dying, that still wasn't decided. He wouldn't decide. I would die a suitable death, and I was cursed to keep rushing him to hurry up and decide how.
姫様は、お前はどうするんだ？
私？
ああ、もう誰も追ってこないだろうからな。
I wasn't exactly sure. But it meant that she could also not have to be a killer anymore.
でも私、人殺ししか知らない。
Saying those words, she lowered her head sadly. Looking at her lonely figure made me feel sad somehow too. So I kept on talking.
なあ、一粒の麦を植えるとどれくらいの収穫になるか知っているか？
いきなり何のこと？
At the sadness, the princess gave me a mysterious look, but I paid no heed and continued speaking.
実は麦ってのは倍の量しか取れないんだ。
倍？たったそれだけなの？
まあ、あんなに苦労して育ててもそんなもんだ。
I went on, somewhat proudly. And for some reason, she was listening intently to my story.
だがな、育てる場所によっては3倍も4倍も収穫できるそうだ。
それは豊かな土地って意味なの？
いや、そうではない。仮に麦を育てるには適さない地域でも、そのような穴場はどこにでもあるもんなのさ。
へえ。
And she continued to look at me, impressed.
でもあなた、麦の育て方は知らなかったんじゃないの？
ああ、詳しくは知らない。ただ、育てるに向いている場所なら。
If nothing else, I had a bit of an idea where. It's already been 10 years since I've gone back. I was sure that the house still remained. It wasn't that big, but it was a strong one made of stone. The field had grown wild, but it was probably still fertile even now. And even now, it was supposed to be hers.
ねえ、一つだけ質問していい？
一つだけならな。
どうしてあなた、いつも悲しそうな顔をしているの？
そりゃ、
Because it's a sad word. To distinguish night. And again, 4 years later. Once again, there was a call for a campaign. It had been a number of years since there had been a serious campaign. Whoa. Of course, it wasn't like I had done absolutely nothing since the previous campaign. I had joined battling countless little border scuffles and had my obligations as a proper decorated knight. And even though I hadn't really done much great work, for some reason my fame kept growing. Without a doubt, it was that Archbishop's fabrications were all things I had no memory of doing. As my patron, he seemed to see me as a convenient tool with which to increase his own fame. And because of that, appeals for this most recent crusade were made not only by the church, but also by the Viscount. It's not a chain of events I can say no to, but if I can, I'd like to refuse. My spirit was leaden from my previous experience on crusades. I believe hadn't changed, that it was simply a massacre, a holy war in name only. And before I had no choice, I had to do it to survive. Now that wasn't the case. We've lived relatively well and didn't have trouble making a living, so for my part I didn't want to go. But considering my station now, would I be able to refuse? And the one who raised this dilemma was none other than my sister.
お兄様、おめでとうございます。
Those were the first words out of my sister's mouth when she saw me and came running from the field.
聞きましたよ。また遠征に行かれるのですね。
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, sort of. I gave a vague answer. She had probably heard it in town or at a church.
きっとまたお兄様は大活躍ですね。私も楽しみに。すみません。
Huh? Just as I wondered what had happened, my sister undid the ribbon holding her hair back. And with her long hair let down, she brushed off the grains of wet on her clothes and adjusted her collar.
騎士様の前で失礼いたしました。
Huh? She lowered her head and made a deep curtsy. Only the gently smiling sister working the fields was nowhere to be seen.
我ら信徒の誉れです。どうか一心のご活躍を期待しております。
How was I supposed to answer? Just before, when I couldn't respond, I couldn't seem to find any words. And so I asked not about myself, but a worry if I had for my sister. So, if I died, what would you do?
死ぬ？教会から名誉騎士に推薦されようかというあなた様がですか？
Yep, that's how combat is. Even I will be killed when the time comes.
大丈夫です。 騎士様には神の加護がございます。
She declared that with certainty. Surely you don't mean I'm being protected and kept alive by an invisible power?
その通りです。
It was an answer with no hesitation. She spoke with direct, clear eyes and not a hint of worry. A few days later, I was on my way to faraway land. As always, it was a country completely unrelated to my own. And by the hand of the Archbishop placed under my command were 10 knights and over 100 volunteer commoner soldiers. Of course, I didn't think that all the knights were genuine. Some of them, like myself, may well have just been calling themselves knights. And thanks to that calculating Archbishop, they received support even though that was a known fact. As proof of that, a deacon could be issuing direct orders accompanying us. We received prayers for our campaign in front of the church. The people seeing us off had gathered from all different parts of this land.
騎士様、どうかお気をつけて。
My sister said that as she ran over. Folding her hands together, she prayed in my direction. I felt a helpless sadness as I looked at my sister, and I couldn't help but speak up. Hey, hold up, stopping like I'm some kind of stranger.
ですけど。
It's fine, tie up your hair like you always do and smile for me. To be honest, I didn't know if I could return alive. This might be the last time I saw my sister. Even if I were kept alive and protected by some invisible power that had only been up until now, there was no telling the future. I knew very well that he was capricious. Look, we're heading off. Hurry and do it.
はい、わかりました。
And reluctantly, she tied up her hair and faced me again.
いってらっしゃいませ、ヨハン兄さん。
She said it with a smile. Even it was a bit stiff, it was my sister's old familiar expression. A few weeks later, we finally reached the place where we would meet with the main force. As before, it was overflowing with dark people. However, unlike the previous time, we were enjoying the main force and were taking completely separate action. I didn't know what that was supposed to mean, or the purpose, but we advanced on the orders of the deacon. It was more horrible there than I had imagined it. It had been bad before, but now it was even worse. The town had black smoke billowing in places, and the streets echoed with the voices of those fleeing and those chasing and killing. Most likely a large number had fled into the church. The entrance was barred from the outside. They were going to set fire to it with them trapped inside. Even though I knew what was going to happen, all I could do was stand aside and watch.
構わないでください。あなたたちの目的地は別です。
The deacon gave us our instructions. Even here, the deacon was giving us instructions to move independently rather than joining with the main force. Eventually, as we came to the edge of the town,
ヨハン、あの屋敷の主を召してください。
Understood. I immediately responded to the deacon's orders. I knew that, even if I asked why we were attacking, it would be meaningless. So I positioned the volunteer soldiers around the estate and, accompanied by the so-called knights we'd gathered this time, entered. Kicking down the door, we unceremoniously pushed our way inside. In that instant, we heard what sounded like women screaming. Ignoring that, we proceeded deeper into the mansion. I have a weird feeling now, you know? Along the ways, anyone who resisted was felled in a single stroke. Eventually, we came to an inner room in the building and found what was most likely the owner. It appears that you're the master.
頼む。どうか見逃してくれ。この通り、銀貨でも宝石でも好きなだけやる。
But you know, it's kind of weird. Because, let's face it, if you are attacked by someone and you are telling to give him money and such, that really won't work. Because the person can take it by himself. But never mind. So, you know, planning for life won't really help. While saying that, the monster of the house held out a small box of silver to us. It was so great an amount all the other knights stopped unceremoniously. Some of them look at each other. A few even start whispering. How pathetic. These are my subordinates. While muttering that, I cut the master of the house down through the shoulder. The blow was without hesitation or mercy. And then, grabbing the small box of silver in his hand, I scattered it across the room. The silver made metallic ringing sound as it scattered across the floor, wet with the master's blood. What are you doing? Something like this, you can just take it after you've killed them.
はい、わかりました、ヨハン隊長。
The knights bent over to gather up the scattered silver coins. As I watched them, the sight made me sad somehow. And then, when we set fire to the place and were about to leave,
お前たち、きっと天罰が下るぞ。
oh, we're still alive. I looked down to see the master, grabbing my foot and cursing us with his dying breath. I continued to speak to him. Sorry, I don't believe in God.
貴様らは騎士でも何でもない。ただの。
Slash. That's right, we're nothing more than killers. Words for the already motionless master. When leaving the estate, we gathered up everything of value, killed anyone that moved, set fire to it, and departed.
どうだヨハン。ちゃんと殺したか？
Yeah, without a doubt. I replied to the slightly agitated deacon. I didn't know the details and didn't care to ask. Most likely there was some benefit to be had by killing the master. Some benefit to the archbishop, specifically. A few days later, the streets of the city were already in ruins. The only ones that moved were soldiers. Besides them, there were probably only corpses and mice. It looks like I can return home safely soon. I wasn't going to be like before, naive and joining other armies. However, the deacon once again gave us orders.
ヨハン。もう一人だけ打ち倒すべき者がいます。
Of course. Even if I objected, it would be useless. My mind was on returning home as soon as possible. Obeying the deacon, we traveled for a whole 3 days. The place we arrived at was some town in the countryside, seemingly untouched by battle yet. Most of the buildings were undamaged. Bad feeling in my guts. And pointing to the large church.
ここにいる者をすべて召してください。
Eh? Everyone? But is this not a church?
ヨハン。彼らは悪しき者なんですよ。
Huh? I didn't really have any words to say back. The deacon's eyes were dark, not clear. I'm sure that it had nothing to do with good and evil. It was simply that if they got in the way of his interests, he'd eliminate them. Of course, I didn't have any intention of objecting to that. If nothing else, I didn't think I had the right to. However, Deacon, there's a small number of formal soldiers protecting them. I'd say about 10 at a glance.
それが何か？
I meant that with volunteer soldiers we'd suffer serious losses. And from what I've seen on how those self-described knights fought before, they weren't exactly a force to be reckoned with. At my rather plain thoughts,
ヨハン。何のためにお前たちを飼っていると？
the deacon spoke coldly. I hadn't heard wrong. He said keep like I was a dog.
ここには生き残りの皇族や高位の者もいるはずです。
Yeah.
大丈夫ですよ。神のご加護がついていますから。
Not true. This time he said it with a thin smile, a hateful smile. Fine, it's not something that we can refuse either way. Why did the deacon know? That such important people would flee into such a small church. The main force hadn't even known that. I felt fear at how the deacon gave his order with full knowledge of this fact. I was sure this was why we'd been deployed on this crusade. So they really were going to use the confusion of battle to kill their enemies. Quickly I gathered my men and gave them orders. I mounted 30 knights and volunteer soldiers on horses, intending to use them as cavalrymen to advance. I had the remaining 50 or so support us with longbows positioned around the church to prevent anyone from escaping. Even if there were only 10, if they were protecting important people, then it was very likely they were formidable warriors. In front of the main entrance to the church, I gathered up the horses and ordered them to stand. If possible, I didn't want to fight car soldiers straight on. I wanted them to surrender after seeing the number of knights we had. That was considering the potential damage to us, but also because that previous order was to kill everyone inside. That didn't include the soldiers outside. Even someone like myself didn't want any unnecessary battle or killing. And apparently my thinking had been conveyed to them, because a single person slowly came out from the church. Judging by his armor, he wasn't a common soldier. Without a doubt, he was a proper knight. As the man approached slowly, he spoke in a reverberating voice.
お前が指揮官か。名前は
Johann, yours?
名乗るほどでもない。
Saying that, he stood directly in front of me, a great, big, bulky knight. Listen well, you've already been surrounded. However, if your soldiers surrender, we won't kill you.
兵だけか。
Yeah, everyone else will be killed. If the soldiers do not surrender, then they too will be killed to the last man. I answered honestly. Even if I tried to trick them in such a situation, I knew from experience that nothing good would come of it.
わかった。ヨハン、投降しよう。
Saying that, the knight walked closer. I raised my right hand high up and turned the palm on my back, hand back. This was signal to the archers to relax their aim and await instructions held drawn. We somehow managed to go through without fighting. I was relieved on the inside, but for some reason, that knight continued to walk over while carrying his sword. Hey, I accept your surrender, but first, put down your sword.
ああ、そうだったな。
He said that, but continued to walk toward me, sword in hand. A slight bit of unease and irritation crept into my voice. Do not come any closer! I told you to drop your sword now!
そりゃ無理だ。手にくっついているからな。
What? And I made to order the archers to fire. It was then. Suddenly my horse collapsed and I was thrown. In the instant before I crashed to the ground, I saw the other men flying in the air, just like myself. At first I didn't realize what had happened. Being thrown hard on the ground and unable to breathe just made it worse. And when I finally managed to stand, already that lone knight was dying, his body showered with arrows. In the area there were a number of horses flailing while collapsed on the ground and 5 soldiers groaning. It seemed he struck not at us but the front legs of the horses. So the idea he had earlier against the 4 knights probably came from this. Well, from what he experienced actually. Hey, is he breathing? I spoke to the knight, who was already half dead. For this one man, we had lost 6 knights. Why did risk such a stupid suicide attack?
そりゃ、こうでもしないと、騎兵には歯が立たないだろう。それともヨハン、俺を卑怯だと言いたいのか？
Nope, not really.
死ぬ気になれば軽いもんさ。
With those final words, the nameless knight died. For some reason, his open eyes didn't seem dark. And what happened then was simply heroic. Up against not even 10 soldiers, we paid a huge cost. What started as 70 volunteer soldiers had become just a few. The self-described knights were all dead. We learned the strength of true knights who had a mission, beliefs sworn to fealty. And when we finally entered the church, there were a number of people who were clearly not commoners. I didn't have to listen to the end. Everyone here, whatever they were, was going to be killed. Next I pointed my sword at someone wearing red clothing. He was most likely an orthodox member like us, but that didn't matter. After that it was just killing whoever came within reach. The living became the dead, the moving became unmoving, everything was sent back. Finally, when we were about to set fire to the place, it was one young nun. I found her hiding under the altar. I suddenly pointed my sword at her. There was nothing I particularly wanted to say. I just had to bring my sword down. And with a bloody sword pointed at her, she probably realized what her fate was. Slowly she put her hands together.
どうかこの者にも慈悲の心を。
The sister began to say a prayer, to the altar stained red by blood splatter. Her eyes were clear, devoid of darkness. Her serious figure, I could see my sister in her. The church burned, a place soaked in blood, with everyone slaughtered. When the fire was set and we left the place, there were only about 10 men with me, and none of them could move well. Most were injured and it was uncertain if they could even return home safely. But with this, we should be done with our mission. I saw that we killed everyone in the church and all the knights protecting it, too, for I didn't want to kill them. No, not everyone. There was just one exception.
よくやったヨハン。国の大司教様も喜ばれることだろう。
The deacon greeted us with a smile. Unlike our blood-soaked selves, his immaculate robes were striking. For our losses were forgiving.
気にするな。今回も最高の勲はお前のものだ。きっと教会からも名誉騎士として推薦されるぞ。
And he patted me on the shoulder while surprisingly showing his white teeth and smiling amiably. Normally, there wouldn't be any way someone like myself could be an honored knight. There's probably another thing that would be of benefit to the Archbishop.
ところでヨハン、そのシスターは誰だ？
The deacon noticed the lone exception. She had been standing at my side, as if hiding.
まさかお前、殺さずに連れてきたのか？
Yeah, because there was no point in killing her.
何を言っている？皆殺しだと指示したはずだ。早く殺せ。
Then think of her as my sister.
バカなことを言うな。お前は教会からの推薦を棒に振りたいのか？
And the deacon continued to speak even more. Eventually his way of speaking became rough.
早くその娘を殺せヨハン！命令だぞ！
And slash!
裏切るつもり。
Oh, well, that's what happens when you don't dirty your own hands, I guess. Enough, say no more. And the deacon fell silent, eternally silent. Everyone, listen up. I spoke to the surviving soldiers. There were only about 10, all injured. The deacon died in combat, understood? Everyone nodded silently. They knew anyone who opposed me would become another to die in combat. We have completed our mission already, we're going home. With those words I started walking, accompanied by his sister. The surviving volunteer soldiers began to walk after me. These soldiers probably won't make it home alive. They will be caught up in a battle somewhere or attacked by bandits in the forest. Being injured here, especially with black injuries rendering one unable to walk, was the same as dying. 2 days later, in a little village just across the border, I accompanied the sister to the front of a church.
ヨハン様、どうもありがとうございます。
If the army follows you here, show them this message. They'll probably leave you alone. I handed her a message and some silver coins. This time it was a document from the church I received from the Archbishop.
あなた様には感謝しております。
With those words, the sister bowed in thanks. And upon leaving, she murmured,
ヨハン様、きっとあなたは聖者となるべく騎士です。
Say what? No, I'm just a killer.
そんなことはありません。これからもご活躍されることを祈っております。
With those final words, the sister headed to the church. Me? A saint? What a laugh. I was simply a killer, the farthest you could be from a saint. And I also knew that the fate of a killer is a pitiful thing. Alrighty. So that was chapter 8, ladies and gentlemen. Let's end it here, obviously. Well, ends tomorrow. Chapter 9 begins. Hope you enjoyed this, and, well, hope to see you in the next one. Bye.